Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of Broadcast Bros. My name is Joe. I'll be one of your hosts along with Jake and Lee. In this channel, podcast, wherever you find this media, we're going to be discussing many things like superhero movies, comics, Star Wars, Marvel, UFC, anything under the sun. A little backstory about us. We are three friends from college who just kind of came together, loving discussing things, having some arguments, having some chats. We thought it'd be a good idea to share that with all you guys, and maybe you'd find our conversations as interesting as we do. Without further ado, I'll throw you over to Jake and let him introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Jake, aka Bean Soup. I'm gonna be your typical moderator of the conversation, keeping the boys at bay, making sure they don't rip each other's throats out. And happy to be part of this.
Hey.
Oh, hey, what's up? I'm Lee. Nice to meet you guys. Back over to Joe.
Always keeping it simple, Lee. Thank you. All right, so today we have a very important topic that we're going to discuss. Something me and Jake had been discussing over dinner. I'll let him throw out the ground rules of what we're about to talk about.
It's a very expensive dinner. He didn't even pay. I'm a little offended.
Didn't put out.
Did you put out? So basically, what we're doing, we're going to be talking about which we think is a better movie, the Batman versus the Dark Knight, and they're obviously two of the best superhero movies that have come out in the past 2 decades. So we want to get into the nitty gritty about kind of what makes a good movie, what makes a bad movie, and then compare and contrast which one does what better. Lee, you got any starting points?
So am I taking the Dark Knight for this? Is that where are we doing like
You can take whatever the hell you want, man.
Alright, so I guess if we're arguing which one's better, I'll take the Dark Knight for this because I know Joe, you said you wanted to do the Batman. Yeah, I mean
So
I'll let
yeah, I guess before we start, you guys want to talk about like to you kind of what makes a good superhero movie? So Lee, you guys start.
Alright. For what makes a good superhero movie, I'm gonna say one of the biggest things for me is the villain. And I think we can all agree that there's no movie with a better villain than The Dark Knight. Arguably Infinity War. I could have a conversation with that, but that's for another time. Yeah, and I think that the Joker was one of the best villains of any movie. However, it wasn't just him. There was a great story. There was a lot of character development. There was a lot of great action sequences, and I think it kept you on the edge of your seat the whole time, which is all I really want in a movie. I mean, it was pretty fantastic. Joe, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I do agree. A good villain, helps a superhero movie go. But I just feel in a real superhero movie that I enjoy, I gotta feel something. I have to be sympathetic with the characters in the movie. I gotta feel what they're feeling. I have to be like absorbed into the universe that they're in. If I'm sitting there as a bystander just watching these awesome events go by, it's cool to see explosions and Michael Bay, Lincoln Park stuff, everything's blowing up. I prefer to dive into something and really feel like I'm there. And I think the Batman did that better than the Dark Knight.
Okay, so what's the criteria like that we're great? Are we just doing a
So
standard? This what I think, or is there like criteria points
I
that
guess
we're
it,
going on?
it depends on how you want to talk about it to your side, right? So I mean, things you can talk about, like you can talk about aspects of the movie that are involved in all movies. So you can talk about like cinematography, you can talk about music, you can talk about environmental storytelling. It doesn't just have to be to your main point, like the Joker was a better villain, therefore I think the movie's better. Just like tell us a little bit of things about the movie that you thought that did better than the Batman, right? So
Okay,
again, it could be any sort of like environmental thing, it could be any sort of
so I'm gonna break it up into three basic arguments. Then the storyline, number one, obviously, like the plot and like how it progressed. The characters, like obviously, what happened to him or whatever, and finally, just I guess one thing that just separated it from everything from all of the movies to me. So I'll just do the story first, and then Joe, you can do the story, and we'll kind of go back and forth, just so I'm not talking for like 5 minutes. But so the storyline, obviously, Dark Knight. It's, I mean, when it come out? 2008, right?
Yep.
No,
Yep.
yep.
yeah, 2008. Yeah. Um, so let's just get right off the bat. Timing of that year, I believe it came out before Iron Man, or like right after Iron Man. Jamie, can you check that?
It's a great thought. I
Yeah,
do not
sure.
know.
Okay, so let's talk timing. So number one, I think with the Dark Knight walked so the Batman could run, and what I mean by that was at the time there wasn't a lot of standard for superhero movies. I mean, we basically had the old Fantastic Four, X-Men, and the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, which of course are solid, good, all of them good films, especially Sam Raimi's. But there wasn't a lot of standard for what a good superhero movie was. So Christopher Nolan, you can see it's a good thing and a bad thing because he had a clean slate, but also he had to set the bar. And I believe that he did that, and it hasn't been matched since. I mean, we're still talking about it almost 15 years later. And so when you look at the storyline, the opening sequence of the Joker's robbing the bank and everything to do with Harvey Dent. I didn't even like Harvey Dent as a character, and coming out of this, I thought he was a fantastic villain. They gave that love interest of Rachel. She had a lot going on in terms of like actually like a decent female like lead that motivated Batman in the movie that I don't think we've seen since. And also, I think that just the general suspense of it being a thriller combined with a superhero film hasn't been seen since because every single scene that Heath Ledger is in, people don't know what they're going to expect. And just the general idea of having a character that is so unpredictable, I don't think it's been done since.
Okay, I'm gonna hop in here. I think Xavier
Yeah.
went a route of difficulty of the story being made and expectations, so I'm gonna follow suit. Also, by the way, I just looked it up. I believe Dark
So,
Knight came out 2 months after Iron Man.
yep, it was April 30th, 2008 for Iron Man, and then Dark Knight came out July 14th,
Okay,
2008.
so here's what I'll say about the story of the Dark Knight. You know how difficult of it, or how high expectations were. Iron Man was one of the biggest mainstream superhero movies that came out in that time. Like you mentioned, the Spider-Man movies early before that, but Christopher Nolan kind of had very few expectations set upon him because superhero movies were still seen as taboo and not seen as cultural phenomenons like they are now. The Batman not only is following all of these prior Batman movies before, like The Dark Knight, and then oh my God, what is it? Who directed those older ones? Michael Keaton and all them.
Oh, Tim Burton.
Tim Burton Batmans, and then Adam West before that. But all these Batman iterations, and don't even forget to mention cartoons and TV shows. But all these iterations had come up before it and made Batman their own. So the land that they had to work with, where like creative freedom was just getting smaller and smaller each time. Despite that, the Batman still made me feel like this was the realest Batman I've ever seen. You know, Xavier just talked about the opening of The Dark Knight. The
Who's
opening of the
Xavier?
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, we have another friend called Xavier. I'm gonna mix up their names because he was supposed to be on the show today. Lee, I'm sorry. You're right. I've done that a few times today, I think. But Lee mentioned at the beginning of The Dark Knight that it was, a really compelling story being told in the bank robbery. But I think the beginning of the Batman is 10 times the opening. Just it described how truly fearful these criminals were of Batman, and
Smoking
seeing them.
crack. They did the same thing in The Dark Knight. The same exact
No,
thing.
no, no, no.
Remember, they're selling drugs, and the guy's like, "Not tonight," and he's like, "You have more chances of winning the Powerball than running into him." That's the same.
Exactly. So they gave you a 30-second look into who was fearful of him, and one of the two villains there were. That's not really compelling, but they showed you like 10 different criminals in 10 different sections of Gotham, and each one wasn't afraid just because they saw the bat signal. They were afraid to go down dark alleyways. They were afraid to go down a single alleyway in Gotham, which probably has thousands of them, because they were afraid the off chance that he was going to be there, they were just going to get absolutely demolished. And I think that's the aura that Batman has. That's what he doesn't have superpowers. He can't be everywhere. So he uses that fear and he spreads it. It's almost like a villain kind of, but obviously he uses it for good. So I think the opening scenes of the Batman are some of the best storytelling that I've ever seen in a superhero movie. I absolutely loved it.
I mean, I get what you're saying because like this guy is like basically like a murderer. The Robert Pattinson one, he's like basically beating these guys to death. But I don't think Robert Pattinson did a better job than Christian Bale. I mean, he had a different approach to it. What?
I disagree. I disagree.
So wait, so you think Robert Pattinson did a worse job than Christian Bale?
Oh, I thought you said he did worse. I'm saying Robert Pattinson did better than
Yes,
Christian
yeah,
Bale.
yeah,
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 I
yeah.
think
No,
you're
Oh,
both
you
both
agree?
on the same
Okay.
page there. Yeah.
but yeah, but that's also I feel like just a different approach to it. But in terms of like I guess you could say, because that whole scene where they're having the meeting and the Joker comes in and he puts a pencil through the guy's face and he's like, "Oh, I know why you have these meetings during the day." Like people are still scared of him. Like it just is done a little more subtly because the Dark Knight has more storytelling to tell than just, "Oh, he's a psychopath that runs around killing people." And it's
But here,
also at a different stage in his career, so he's like more like refined than he was at the beginning, and he has a little more control. So I feel you're comparing apples to oranges.
all right, but here's my question. You've seen both movies, obviously. Which two scenes, so the opening of the Batman and the hidden meeting in the Dark Knight and the when they see the bat signal in the Dark Knight, which group made you feel more like, holy crap, it's Batman?
I like the Joker, the scene of the bank robbery from the Dark Knight. I think it's a better scene than
You think that makes you feel more like, oh my god, it's Batman than the opening of the Batman?
for a. It's not necessarily more authentically Batman, but it is a better scene of a movie.
Ah, see, I'm talking about authenticity here.
Oh, if I can interject for just a sec, not to cut you guys
Yes,
off,
with
but
it.
you have to kind of look at it within the scope of what the movie was trying to do. So, The Dark Knight is the second movie in a trilogy, versus the Batman is essentially a rehash origin movie. So,
Mm-hmm.
The Dark Knight was trying to set more up the villain because we already have Batman in that universe established in the first movie, versus the Batman you have to because he's the star of the show. It's the Batman, right? You have to try to make the Batman seem a lot more menacingly, just as the sake of what the story is trying to do. So I think that the Dark Knight specifically is like we have to dedicate most of our stuff because they already know that criminals are scared of Batman, right? They already know that because it was established of him just kicking ass and beating up a bunch of criminals in the first movie. So the second movie they wanted to take apart, and that's why you have the bank robbery scene because it's more to set up the Joker than it is to set up Batman.
I know my family loves me, but it's still nice to know that they say it.
Yeah, but like
They don't.
I think they were respecting that it's a different. If they were both first movie of a trilogy, I think that that argument has a lot more weight. But I think that because it's the second movie in the trilogy with a character that's already established versus one that you're trying to establish the character, it's a little bit different. So you have to look at it within the scope of what the director was trying to do.
Okay,
And
so you're saying because they're not at the same time points in, say the Batman becomes a trilogy, because these two movies we're comparing aren't at the same period or time in the trilogy, that the Dark Knight deserves a pass in their portrayal of early Batman in the movie.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right, that's
I
fair.
think that I guess this is a little bit off topic, but if you look at the dark, what is it? What's the first one called? Batman Begins.
Yeah, Batman Begins.
I think that that comparison's a lot stronger for the Batman when you compare it to Batman Begins instead of the Dark Knight.
I mean, I definitely like the Batman, the 2022 one, more than Batman Begins.
Exactly.
I
But
hope so.
But I think
but I, in
that's a
terms of a
comparison
better
they're trying to make.
in terms of a better movie, I think Christopher Nolan had more to say with The Dark Knight because you look at. I feel like he did a lot of commentary on society with like post 9/11. Like we were so afraid of terrorism, and I thought the Joker and all those the acts of terror he did a great job of showing how like the whole idea of the Morgan Freeman character, us giving up our freedoms for the sense of security with the cell phones, and the whole idea of Batman flying to Hong Kong because he has no jurisdiction, I felt was a great, and I've totally stolen this from YouTube videos, so this is my original idea. But it was a great symbolism for Americanism after 9/11 because we basically, he was basically saying with the Morgan Freeman and cell phone things, obviously we've given up our sense of freedom for the idea of being safe. And then the same thing with Batman flying to Hong Kong, basically saying that now there's no jurisdiction for America. We will go wherever we want to get whoever we want. So I think he had more to say, which makes me impressed that he was still able to conduct one of the best superhero movies while also having a lot to say about our society at the time. And I think this movie will be remembered more in history because it had a lot to say about, like, it represented the time well. Era.
Do you think that's something that should be considered when you talk about the quality of the movie, though? Is
Yes, because
the political
it's
statements
longevity.
it's trying to make?
It's longevity. Like, we're still talking about it. Like I think it will be talked about for longer because of that.
Well, I guess let me ask you this question: is the reason why you're talking about it now for the sake of what the movie was trying to say, or for other aspects of the movie, like Heath Ledger's performance?
I mean, that was my last thing about the story. We can talk about characters now, but
Wait, no, I wanted to kind of concede a little point there. What you said about the I guess political commentary, it was very powerful in that movie, and I don't think the Batman can quite match that level. Like they discuss corruption and political abuse of power, which I guess is representative of the times right now in 2022. So I guess you can say they tried, but if we're talking about the power of the message, I do think the Dark Knight does take that win.
So 0.1 story for Lee. Okay, got it. Moving on. Characters.
What do you mean? I won.
You
the
just
story.
said you concede. You literally used the word concede.
Oh no.
Oh boy.
Did he not? Did he not?
It's true. He did say that.
I used the word
I'd like to
concede.
concede. He did say that.
Okay.
I
point for
that
Lee.
one entire chunk.
All right. Game point.
Well,
1 out of 3.
I guess just kind of the summary was saying. So you're saying that, like, you know, in terms of like kind of the underlying political undertones of a movie does have important weight into the longevity of a movie and I guess because I think it would do make sense because I think the whole point was essentially that, like, everybody wants freedom until something violates our safety, and then we want it to be taken care of.
I think the best movies of all time had something to say. At least for me. Like you know, you look at like movies like Fight Club. You know. I guess just that the more time goes on, they're still relevant because what they have to say, it still applies. So it will last longer. So thank you, Joe, for conceding, and thank you everyone for listening. So all right, so let's talk about villains, right?
Okay, well, yeah, let's talk about the next. So we obviously have two different villains. Which one does a better job? I have a feeling I already know the answer to this one.
On this one. I'm going first on this one. Right. So, to all of our viewers, to put some information behind this, if I hadn't watched the Batman last night in preparation for this, I would have instantly conceded this at the beginning of this episode that the Joker was better than the Riddler. But
2 out of 3. Thank you, everyone.
Oh,
if I hadn't.
We have our first hot take of the day. Let's go. Joe, please explain.
Riddler did a much better job, and you don't realize it until close to the end when Batman is punching the glass, mad at him that he got one over at him. And I was sitting there thinking how mad I was at the Riddler. I didn't know why. It's because when you watch these movies, you put yourself in the shoes of the hero. So, like, when you watch, you're the Batman, obviously. And I'm watching this through his eyes, being so mad at this ordinary man. Like, that was so infuriating. He's so normal, and he's causing so much destruction, and he's so much smarter than I am. And his averageness was infuriating me. And I think that's what they tried to pull across. Like, he was recruiting normal people from any other neighborhood. He was a normal person. So he was just, it was so infuriating to see I was so powerless against such a normal, average person. Whereas the Joker is like almost superhuman with his planning and with his timing and with his like oddly strong strength. Like, you don't know if you haven't seen the cartoons, but he's like super strong somehow. But because of today's time where we're feeling super like powerless with ourselves and the government, having a villain that made us feel powerless while he himself had none infuriated me to no end. I think he did his job so well.
I was kind of thinking about this earlier too. I guess because I remember talking to Joe about this a little bit earlier. Is like I was so mad that the Riddler was just like an average dude, and I guess to your point, I thought that took away from the movie. But you kind of gave me a little bit of a perspective on it that because he's an average dude, it made him a better villain.
Yeah.
All right, Xavier, what do you say?
Damn it, guys.
Lee.
Thank you.
He's new.
God damn. All right. So I was I kind of get what you're saying, but at the same time, I think the Riddler was solid, but it was also it was inspired by the Zodiac Killer, and I like that, and the Saw movies, and I like that. However, I just think that we've seen multiple interpretations of the Joker since then and prior to, and yeah, I think Joaquin Phoenix did a decent job. But in terms of the level of edge of your seat, every time he's in a scene with someone, you're genuinely. I consider him like a horror movie villain, just because he's like not only kind of grotesque to look at, but he also is just so unpredictable, and he challenges the ideology of the protagonist better than any other villain. And I think that is what is most important in one of these movies, because it's not so much a physical challenge as it is an ideological challenge, because he's testing his limits and seeing how far he will go. And not only of Batman, but of the citizens of Gotham. Like when they're on the ferry and he gives them the detonators and he says, hey, either you're going to die or the prisoners. I think, again, that's Christopher Nolan putting a mirror to society and saying, if you were put in this position, what would you do? Whereas there was never really a time in the Batman when the Riddler did something where I thought to myself, what would I do? And those are the types of questions that I think have us leaving the theater remembering the experience better, because not only it resonated with me more because a lot of the things Joker was doing, I was kind of like, well, he's just kind of got a fucking point, and especially when he's like burning the money and doing all this, it just shows he's not motivated. Like Alfred said, who's the guy, Michael Caine, who plays Alfred, that whole speech about how some men just want to watch the world burn. I feel like that's what makes him the dangerous, is he's just out there to send a message. And it showed that perfectly with Harvey Dent, which is why Harvey Dent was the perfect side villain for him in the movie. And yeah, it left me thinking, like I said, it put a mirror to us, being like, well, what would you do in this situation? Which I don't think the Riddler did it at all in the Batman.
So actually, I'm gonna counter that. Xavier said it was kind of scary to have a mirror held up to you and be asked a question.
Who said that?
Oh my God, Lee! I'm sorry.
You're not even trying at this point.
We're trying as hard. We're trying as hard as we can. You're the one making it difficult, dude.
We filmed an earlier episode with Xavier, and we're just used to it. I mean, when you film for an hour,
you're gonna go back and cut that. You're gonna go back and edit that out.
All right, just start over.
All right. So as I was saying,
cut that.
So he said that it's scary to have a mirror held up to you and be asked, what would you do? I think the director of the Batman held up a mirror to society and asked you, what would your neighbor do? And I think that's even more horrifying. So you see all these random people, in that group chat in the movie, they're like, what type of gunpowder should we bring? What explosives? And it's like making you think not about yourself, but who in society today would be so willing to cause so much damage and destruction? And I think that's the narrative for 2022, and I think that's more powerful. Like, what is your neighbor capable of? If they're just an average Joe, picket fence, goes to work a 9 to 5, what are they truly capable of if put in a position where they feel like they can't take any more pressure, I guess I'll say. I think that's much more horrifying, because there can be only a few crazy psycho villains in this world, like even in real life, but there can be so many average Joes who just go out and do horrible things. And I think that's a much more terrifying picture.
Well, then that's what he did. That's what Christopher Nolan did. Again, going back to Harvey Dent, because at the beginning of the movie, he's like this exemplary, stand-up, ideal citizen, and by the end of it, he's a deranged psychopath. So it's basically saying, like, how far does it need to go to push you to break? Which, again, I mean, it's kind of, I think it's kind of what you're saying in terms of, like, what would your neighbor do? Like, what would it take to get to them? But it's also, like, the best of us, not even just average Joe. Like anyone can break psychologically, but this guy was supposed to be the best of us, and he's still cracked, which I think goes
I guess.
Point.
I'm not really saying how much would it take for your neighbor to be broken. I'm saying how willing is your neighbor to do this without any pressure is a better way I should have said it. Well, these people didn't take any push or break or anything. They wanted it. They needed it. So how willing are your neighbors to do this psycho stuff?
The Riddler wasn't causing the pressure. The Joker was. So what you're saying is the Riddler is just a passive character who's just standing. He's not causing the action, whereas the Joker is directly causing all of this chaos to show.
No, I disagree.
Yes, the Riddler is just a victim of circumstance, where he was just orphaned in a. We don't even know if he made that chat room. He could have been just
sought out those people.
Huh?
They thank him for starting this movement. They're followers of him. He's like an ideal image, an anti-hero for
But
people to
he didn't
follow.
cause any of the circumstances that put them in there. Society did. So you're arguing that society is the better villain in that circumstance, whereas I'm saying everything that's happening to Harvey Dent or the people of Rachel or the people of Gotham, the Joker is directly doing to show them that how weak their infrastructure really is and their framework. So in other words, he is the action, he is the chaos, he is the destruction, whereas the Riddler is just he's just a victim of circumstance.
All
So
right,
it could
so my final argument on here will be, and I'll pass it back to Jake. If that's true, then the Joker affected two really important people. Riddler, in my opinion, affected hundreds of normal people.
I was
If we
just
talk
using that as an example.
no, you said it. If we talk about widespread influence of an ideology and a horrible behavior, the Riddler affected way more people than the Joker ever did.
No, because you're just talking about people in a chat room, and he didn't even do the things that they're upset about. Joker is telling you, I did these things, and
He
you're
gave them the tools how to deal with their anger in obviously a horrible way. That's all they need. He doesn't need to be the one that makes them upset.
no, yes, he does, because then he's not causing any of it. So therefore, he didn't do anything. He's not moving the plot forward. Whereas everything that the Joker does, he steals the money from the mob, moves the plot forward. He breaks into the Harvey Dent's organization, and he's killing all the men dressed up like Batman, saying, "Hey, identify yourself, take off the mask." And then he decides, you know what, fuck that. I don't even want to know because it's more fun this way because he likes the game. So I'm saying he causes all that. Where the Riddler is just, I mean, yeah, he's like killing people. He kills people, but none of the actions that's affecting society is because of him. Therefore, he's just another dude. Boom.
Jake, I need you here, Jake. I'm not grasping what he's saying fully.
Okay,
Honestly.
so what he's saying, I think, if I'm understanding Xavier's point correctly, is
Oh my fucking god.
sorry, if I'm understanding Lee's point correctly, what he's saying is essentially that the Joker is, if you take the Joker out of the movie,
Yes.
the there's no other person that could be able to fill that role to create the plot of the movie. Whereas if you take the Riddler out, another
Yep.
person that is, because I think it comes down to basically like mob mentality and group polarity, right? So the more people that you have invested in a specific ideology, the more extreme those behaviors become. So you could take the Riddler out of the movie, and there's still realistically a chance that somebody along the lines would come in and create the plot of that movie.
Yep.
It's a little bit of a stretch, right, to think
That is a
about, right?
stretch.
Because of the how the overriding influence of both the villains. So I think that both of them did an incredible job in terms of manipulating what they needed to manipulate to get done what they wanted to get done, right?
Yep.
So the Riddler, for example, right? I don't know, again, I don't know if he started the chat room, but it seems like he had a big role in bringing these people together and actually planning out what they're gonna do, right? So the Riddler preyed off the he preyed off the people that were victim of circumstance because he's a victim of circumstance, so you can connect to that, which is very powerful because you can create that mob mentality that I was saying before. Whereas the Joker almost single-handedly caused Gotham to question their entire morality and ideology as a people by only affecting a minimum amount. So it depends on how you want to look at it in terms of impact. You know, what's more important, if you infect important individuals that oversee millions, or if you infect millions and cause them to actually take a stand and revolt against society that beat them down.
You know my vote, the millions for me. I think that's powerful.
I mean, no shit. That's why we're having this discussion. But I think Jake summed it up in a way that made my point even better. So thank you.
I don't know. All right, Jake, what's your thought?
You want my input on the whole thing?
Yeah, who won?
Okay, let me just say this. I don't think it's great for a moderator to say who wins or loses, right? I did the joke earlier because Joe just physically said the word. I concede my point here. So I guess it's for the people listening to decide who won, right? That'd be the fair thing to do, and not me kind of gauge what's going on.
Whatever platform this ends up on, comment anything that you guys think. Who won? Who lost? Give us your thoughts. We all love discussing these things. You guys probably have different ideas than we do.
Yeah, you know, and different points to look at things from new perspectives, right? I think you both made very good arguments.
Except you,
right.
Austin. Fuck you.
Austin, if you listen to this, fuck off.
Language.
So, All right, we'll talk about that, Joe. We'll talk about that. We'll circle back. All right. So the next thing we kind of want to talk about, right? So we talked about, storytelling. We talked about we can get into storytelling a little bit. I think we didn't touch on like the whole kind of plot, right? So we can talk about that a little bit if you want. But we talked about like introductions of the hero slash villain, right? We talked about the villain overall, the motivations, their wide range of influence about who may have done it better. The next thing we want to talk about, unless you guys want to talk a little bit more about the story, is
Cool.
other aspects of the movies that make movies good. So, cinematography,
I knew you were
music,
gonna say that.
environmental storytelling, like I was saying earlier. All of these aspects, you can't have a good movie without it, and can make the difference between a good movie and a bad movie. So I kind of want you guys to give your takes on which movie you thought did better of each one of those kind of categories.
Actually, Jake, you take cinematology and all that. When we went out to dinner, Jake and I, he loves that stuff. He talks about that beautifully. Tell us what you think about that stuff, because I know you're really passionate about it.
Okay, again, I'm going to try to keep this within a moderative stance, right?
Or
So in terms of environmental storytelling, you really truly it's kind of a show don't tell type thing about the environment that the hero kind of lives in. So you look at Gotham City because that's the same for both. You look at kind of the state that Gotham's in, how the citizens react, how they react to the situations that are going on into the movie. I think for environmental storytelling, if you take out Batman and just look at Gotham City, there's one movie that did that better. If you implant Batman in the middle of the story, the other movie did that better because it circled around the environment through Batman's lens versus the environment in general. Right. So again, it's a moderative point because I'm saying both sides. I think that if you take Batman out of the story, The Dark Knight has better environmental storytelling because the way that the Joker was able to challenge ideology through the ship, through the manhunt of like, I'm gonna blow up a hospital if you don't give this guy up, right? And it really shows you a lot about how the people of Gotham view their own sense of morality in society versus the Batman. It's really only with one specific scene, right? With the whole Falcone thing, where that's kind of directly challenged, and you really see a lot for the environment outside of like the Riddler's people that he was able to group together. So I think that environmental storytelling, you can make arguments for both, definitely. I think there's one very clear. I mean, we can talk about cinematography, and then we go on to music and the other one that I forgot about.
The Batman is better music. I'll give you that.
Okay.
1000%.
All right. So we're all the
It
Batman.
it has Nirvana.
Bat-
That's all I need.
the Batman has better music. I think that in terms of making Batman look menacing through music alone, like
Yeah.
you can't touch Batman.
oh my
Like
god, it's
his
so good.
and Joe argued this point with me, but I know he's wrong, right? So the Batman's theme, right, is a homage to Darth Vader, which I think is the
No.
smartest move. It's a homage to Darth Vader. You can't tell me it's not. I listened to the audio clips of both. It's a homage to the Imperial March in Darth Vader's theme, and it does a great job of making him just absolutely menacing. As he's coming through that fire, everything's burning around him. His Batmobile's like flipped over, and he's like, I'm here, and he just the slow walk up with that was just absolutely beautiful. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Joe, your rebuttal.
Listen, everyone, just so you know, I am obsessed with Star Wars. That's my thing. Everyone has a thing. Star Wars is my thing. I
It's a bad thing.
watch the movies, TV shows, read the articles online. I do Star Wars. And if I find a piece of Star Wars and other types of media, I'm stoked. I do not see the Imperial March or Darth Vader's theme in the Batman whatsoever.
Joe, post edit, put the clips in, let them decide. Dude, I'm. Ugh. Xavier, am I crazy? Sorry, Lee, am I crazy?
Why are you trying at this point? So doesn't the theme come from the Tim Burton? Isn't it inspired by the Tim Burton theme? I know they just changed it up, but that's the theme from that movie was used. I want to say it's either in the animated series or the Tim Burton film, but I don't know if it's the Darth Vader thing, man. I think you're losing me on that one.
Oh.
But I think I'm surprised. Going back to the environmental, I'm surprised you picked the Dark Knight because I would have given this to Batman, and that the city of Gotham definitely felt better. I think you look at the Dark Knight, it doesn't even feel like a Batman movie at some points. It just feels like a political thriller or like a Christopher Nolan thriller. And I think obviously the Batman 2022 movie is an authentic. It feels like a comic book brought to life. Whereas I never felt that with The Dark Knight, although it was still phenomenal. I just would argue that it's more authentic. Whereas I think Christopher Nolan just wanted to make an interesting movie, and it just felt like it so happened to be with comic book characters. Whereas the Batman, there was never a point where I was like, this like isn't. It was like my childhood brought to life, which I will say gives bonus points. But
So
that's why I was surprised.
I think that you just summarized my point exactly as I made it.
I
Because
thought you said The Dark Knight.
I said The Dark Knight is better environmental storytelling if you take Batman out of both movies.
Okay, yeah. I get what you're saying, but I guess I'm just
Because you even said it turns into widespread political thriller based on the villain. Whereas if you take Batman out of the Batman, the movie kind of falls apart, right? But if you put Batman back in both movies, the Batman does a better job for the reason you described. It's more authentic to a Batman story than the Dark Knight.
Because the Batman is a more protagonist-driven story, whereas the Dark Knight is more of an antagonist-driven story. And so, like you said, like you can't have it without Robert Pattinson. But I also think that's a pro because I think he has a better Bruce Wayne and a more interesting character.
I agree, but like I disagree with what you guys are saying about environment. If you take both Batman out of both movies, like in The Dark Knight, you have the Joker, which is obviously the greatest, if not one of, if not the greatest movie villains of all time. Then who else do you really have there? It's like, but in the Batman, you have Falcone, you have the Penguin, you have all these people who are actually world building, and you feel like you're in a place that's starting to make sense, and you're like, oh, this is Gotham. It sucks here, and there's so many different levels and types of criminals, and you can't escape them. And you see all those. I guess in the Dark Knight, you see corrupt politicians as well. But you actually get to go in the Batman where these corrupt politicians hang out, how they relieve stress, their goings with other villains. I just think the overall world in the Batman is better with him in it or not.
All right, hey, so I got one last thing I definitely want to talk about before we because I only got about another 20 minutes. But all right, pitch me your villain and basic like 1 minute pitch for the next, because they're gonna make another Robert Pattinson, right? So what would you like to see in it? Pitch me the villain, and yeah, hit me with that because I feel like that would be interesting.
All right. Wait, hang on. Before we get into that, Joe, I just want to say one thing real quick because the cinematography, this last thing we talked about with those like elements, I think the Batman wins hands down.
Yeah.
You can't argue otherwise, right?
All the external factors, it wins. Yeah, 100%.
All right. So
Okay.
Joe, you want to go ahead and talk about what your villain would be for the sequel?
I think the Batman is going to find the difficulties that the Christopher Nolan trilogy had with Dark Knight Rises, where you have to have a grounded villain that actually makes sense and can't be like outrageous and have superpowers and everything. It has to be something kind of realistic. I think that's hard to find a unique villain that hasn't been done a million times and make it entertaining and fresh. So I guess my first thought would be the Joker. No, excuse me, not the Joker. I'm sorry. Scarecrow. I like Scarecrow. I would love to see them expand on Martha Wayne's mental health issues and trip to Arkham, and maybe have Scarecrow kind of use that as mental warfare against the Batman if he were to find out his identity. If not, just kind of drag him into Arkham Asylum and test his mental fortitude and his sanity and see where he goes from there. I think he'd be super compelling, but I also think they might just go the Penguin route and have him be like a mob boss and have him be a villain. But I just don't think that's as compelling because you can.
No way.
I don't think they could. They used the Penguin as a sub character and they made him kind of like a butt of the joke a couple of times. I don't see him really doing.
Think they would?
I don't think so.
No,
I think that
no
if you're gonna do a mob boss, you gotta go Black Mask.
I wanted them to do Falcone, except I wanted him to be a normal, like, intimidating gangster guy, not the guy from Transformers. But I expected something different. But I
thought he did a great job though.
I would love
One man fighting for the country.
Yeah.
One man alone, betrayed by the country he loves.
Yeah, that's it.
But yeah, I would love Scarecrow. I hope they go with it. I would love to hear what you guys say if you think another route.
All right, Jake, let me hear it because Joe lost that one. That was Penguin, man. You lost me with that. That was
Let's see. So I think Scarecrow's a great point. I would probably. No. I think I would do. It's tough. I think if you can find a way to grounded Dr. Freeze, his motivations are really strong.
You mean Mr. Freeze?
Yeah, Mr. Freeze are really strong, right?
Lee is offended.
He's offended. I know he's a doctor, so that's why I got confused.
All right.
I think if you can do a grounded version of him, that'd be really compelling because of just like the things with his wife, and it's kind of like it's a dude doing the wrong things for the right reason type deal. I think that makes it for a very compelling villain, right? Because you have that kind of redemption that can result of it. But I think, kind of going like thing, it seems like it's a very mobby Gotham style, right? And if you're going to use the Penguin in the earlier one, I think Black Mask would be the next logical step. But I would like them to explore kind of like an Arkham Asylum type deal if you can do it tastefully and not with the Joker.
All right. I'm so glad neither of you brought it up because you're both so wrong. In that, it's got to be Hugo Strange. It has to be Hugo Strange. You both talked about Arkham. You said you want to see it. Everyone wants to see more Arkham Asylum. They already talked about his mom is literally Arkham who went insane. So, I think you could still do Hugo. He's still grounded. He hasn't. Point one, it's still grounded, so fits the universe. Point two, it hasn't been done in any other live action movie. So you're not doing this Scarecrow, which we saw like 5 years ago. And imagine Hugo Strange, and Batman's investigating through Arkham Asylum, and Hugo is testing on the patients, creating them into like Man Bat or like the ventriloquist. I love the idea of
Man,
You talk about
Yeah,
grounded,
I
you
don't
want
know,
Man Bat to be in there?
dude, you could do a grotesque like he's operating on them,
Dude, he's
and you could
literally,
do
he's
it.
literally God at that point.
Yeah. You got the ventriloquist. You got Mad Hatter. You got Professor Pig. There's a lot of. I think this would be a great time to use a lot of the B, C list villains that are like psychopaths that could pass for ground level, like Mad Hatter, Professor Pig, ventriloquist, and then it's just various. Batman's got to take him down. He's investigating. You could do a whole detective thing with that, and you could explore more. I think everyone wants to see more of the Arkham Asylum in this universe because we've already seen Gotham, and we know how well Matt Reeves can do with Gotham. Imagine what he could do with like a Shutter Island style Batman movie with Hugo Strange being the big bad villain at the end, and he's slowly like dissecting Batman's psychology and yada yada. I mean,
if he's the villain at the end, like a reveal, I'm game. If he's the villain for the whole thing, I think it's too early.
I think that a good way to do it is you could if Doctor Strange is pulling Hugo Strange, Jesus fucking Christ. If Hugo Strange
someone's
is
in med school.
yeah,
The crossover of the century.
my brain is just so full of random information. Is if you it's like say for example he releases quote unquote like Victor Zsasz, right, and he's killing people in Arkham, like the guards, and he's just like going serial killer vibes. It could bring Batman to Arkham Asylum, and then from there I don't think you could have a lot of like video game style villains, like the BCs that you were talking about. I think that like the Arkham Knight or whatever did it well because it's like subplots. But for a movie, I think that you can have like cameos of those characters, but you can't have them have like a significant. You can't have them have like a significant or even a side role because there's just too many of them.
Well, like how I would see it is Hugo Strange is releasing them into the city. For example, the opening sequence is Batman chasing down the guy, the ventriloquist. What's his name? Arthur Wesker or whatever. And then like 20, 30 minutes later into the movie, he sees that Arthur Wesker guy is released, but now he's carrying the dummy. So like they're getting worse. So the whole point is now Batman's not trying to be this brutal he's going for redemption, right? Because he's trying to bring about hope. So he's trying to redeem these people, like in other words, trying to save his mother. But he keeps seeing that they're getting worse at the asylum. So you have they could all just be standard criminals that then they get re-released throughout the movie, like you said, in individual action sequences. But now they're the Professor Pig or Mad Hatter or the ventriloquist, so on and so forth. And they're not like the leading plot. It would be Hugo Strange would be the big bad, but they're just like you said, subplots. But I don't know. I'd rather see that than the Penguin. I'll tell you that much.
Sorry, Joe. You lost me on the Penguin, man.
Yeah,
he's just.
Maybe if it's Danny DeVito. That's the only way.
Okay. Now we're talking.
But yeah, I don't know. Do you want to see a trilogy or what do you want?
I would like a trilogy. I think if they have if they have an overarching story, like if they put Hugo Strange in as the main villain in the third, I'd be down. But if they're gonna do like single stories where they don't have a long overarching theme to link them together, I'd say there's no point in doing it.
I mean,
So
you
I
could
just
Alright.
so you could
pick a
kind of
movie.
combine both movies or both things like Arkham City and Arkham Asylum. If you think about it, like so it starts off as like Arkham Asylum Bill, and then obviously you have these police checkpoints, right? Because all these criminals are getting loose, and so you build a farther and farther barrier to try to keep them contained, and then boom, you get Arkham City out of it.
Boom. See, Jake's on board. Do we want to
And
see
then
Robin at any point?
Oh,
no,
God,
he's too
no.
young, too young. You can maybe do a
Yeah.
cameo of like you know you
No, in the
maybe do a
franchise. In the franchise. Like, let's say they make 3 or 4 of these things. Do we want Robin?
No,
No.
I don't think so. I think if you're gonna have, I mean, because then it depends. I don't know when canonically Batman how old he is when he takes on Robin, if it's even like a described
Great point. I
age.
don't know.
I
Um,
hate to say it, but I feel like they really missed the mark with Ben Affleck's Batman because that would have been the perfect Batman, in my opinion, to have a Bat family. Like imagine Under the Red Hood movie. You guys have both seen that, right? Under the
mhm.
Red Hood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
In my opinion, that's the best storyline period we're ever gonna see. However, I only think it would have worked with the Ben Affleck DCEU Batman. And can you just imagine an R-rated Under the Red Hood Batman movie where like Jason Todd comes back and like I would have it try to have Jason Todd be the central character because I feel like there's so much there and I feel like it's the only villain that or it's the only storyline that like has any personal weight to it because it's like his biggest failure. But I think we'd only the best way to have done it would have been with Ben Affleck because he was older. It was more of a comic book universe. So you could kind of like get away with some of the more comic book stuff because the Christopher Nolan and the Matt Reeves universes they're too grounded. So I don't think that the Robins really work as well. But
Yeah,
imagine,
Robin would just get punched in the face. He'd be a kid. He'd be like, "Oh no!"
just be knocked out
yeah,
cold. But they do make that cameo with the Robin's armor spray painted like "Jokes on You." So I think that
and they had that.
they're kind of hinting to the possibility of that in subsequent things. But Batman vs Superman just took such a big flop; it kind of killed that momentum.
Did you do you ever hear that Zack Snyder intended for that to be Dick Grayson? Though he said that's like
Oh,
he said publicly,
he
which
also
is trash, man.
he also said that he was in his universe that Batman could get raped in prison. So I don't trust anything that man says.
Is someone driving?
Somebody's outside my window right now.
Mowing the
Excuse
lawn.
me.
Oh, I
Um,
can hear an engine,
it's
but
a
I mean we could talk all day about how Zack Snyder dropped the ball on that one, but
a topic for another day. Fixing Batman v Superman.
I definitely remember when that trailer came out and we saw the Robin suit. I was remember just being like, finally we're gonna get an Under the Red Hood storyline because it's an older Batman. He's angry. That would have explained why he was so angry in Batman v Superman, like why he was so basically a murderer is because his sidekick was killed, and so that would explain why he like doesn't trust anyone, yada yada. But then I found out it was Dick Grayson. I'm like, that doesn't make any fucking sense because you have to have a Nightwing. But
Hey, Dick Grayson. That should not be Dick Grayson.
I feel like he just didn't know that Jason Todd existed.
he didn't
No.
know the universe at all. He just watched, yeah. And but anyway, I think that would have been the best universe to do a Bat family, Bat Girl, Bat Nightwing, all that shit. Damian Wayne, because Robert Pattinson, he's so young himself that I don't know if that would work super well. And in this universe, it seems to like you said, Joe, you're gonna have some like 18-year-old kid running around just getting like stabbed. I don't know if that would be fun to watch.
No.
He gets raped.
It'd be a little too hardcore. All right. Looks
Yeah.
like that's everybody's got any summarizing points. We got a little off topic there, but
No, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, we're good.
I mean it's alright. It's what we're here for, right? All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of what are we calling
What's our
ourselves?
name?
What are we calling
What's our name,
ourselves?
Jake?
Something Bros. Thank you for
Podcast bros.
Broadcast Bros. Our first episode. Tune in for more later. Anybody else want to say goodbye?
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
we?
If you have any topics you want us to discuss, we're more than just nerds. If you guys want to talk about daily life stuff, any stories, movies, TV shows, media, just make sure you comment wherever these get posted below. We're gonna take a look at them, and if we see some good ones, we'll talk about them. But we're gonna have a lot of different stuff coming. Or some of us will do individual videos. Like I said, I love Star Wars, so I'll be doing some individual things about the new stuff coming out. And we'll also have Lee, Jake, and some of our other friends doing their own videos as well. So let us know what you guys are interested in. I'm happy you guys are on the ride with us.
Lee, anything to add before we go?
No, I'm good.
All right. Joe might not be a nerd, but I definitely am. So that's always going to be me. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in for the first episode of Broadcast Bros. And we'll see you in the next one.
See ya.